Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tate.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Alan Singer.
Educated historian Dr. Alan Singer, our resident expert on Media Watch. We're doing this session the Tuesday, May 5th, before our usual Monday air date on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And I think it will also show up on Facebook and YouTube at some point. But we're going to try to do a perspective show as opposed to all the breaking nonsense that's going on, because the supposed ceasefire, the non-war, that's really a war that's being called a non-war, so nobody has to get any approval from Congress, etc., for an illegally war of choice launched by the crazy people running this country. That's my editorial. Uh, Perspective on why we have a bunch of crazy people, or who the crazy people are, and the fact that it seems like they are hell-bent on turning the clock back by eviscerating anything that gave any people of color any say, rights, or whatever in the United States of America. Be more specific, guys. What are we actually talking about? The Supreme Court of the United States, the 6-3 conservative people that have basically now gutted the Voting Rights Act so that people of color basically are going to be eviscerated as far as being elected, having the rights basically trampled on in the former southern United States that had been mandated by law to respect those rights. Background, Alan.
Well, we have the worst Supreme Court in the United States since the 1880s. This is why I'm saying that. After the Civil War, Congress passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, ending slavery, ensuring citizenship rights, and guaranteeing that African American men could vote. Congress also passed a series of laws that provided for the enforcement of these amendments. And then in the 1880s, the Supreme Court threw these laws out, said they were unconstitutional, and established separate but equal. Starting in the 1950s, because of the civil rights movement, Congress began passing civil rights laws. 57 and 60 were designed to protect the right to vote. The 24th Amendment outlawing poll taxes. But the two big laws were the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Mm-hmm.
64 Act outlawed discrimination in public accommodations. The 65 Act was designed to protect voting rights. And what the Supreme Court has done now is eviscerated both of these laws, which were part of what we call the Second Reconstruction. The 64 law was very important. It had what was called Title VII. Well, Title VII established that even after a law that was passed by a state or an action by a school board, even if it claimed not to be based on racism, if it had what they call disparate impact, if it had the impact of discriminating against people, it was illegal. Supreme Court has thrown that out, has said disparate impact no longer counts. They believe racism is over. And now states are free to impact all sorts of racist acts, including, and this is the one that's one of the most scary, is they're no longer being checked on how they set up congressional and local electoral districts. Well, among other things, what states like Louisiana are rushing to do is to redraw district lines, taking Black majority communities, Latino majority communities, and dividing them up in different districts so they will not be able to elect Black or Latino representatives. In 1960, before the passage of these laws, there were 4 African Americans in Congress. In 2023, there were 64 African Americans in Congress. I'm sorry, 62. If these districts are redrawn, you're going to drive large numbers of Black and Latino representatives out of Congress, which means Black and Latino people will not be represented in the United States government.
Okay.
Now, I mean, it seems that a lot of younger people don't understand why these laws were came up in the first place. And I mean, I was a little young at the time, but I remember that there were weird voter registration laws that they would ask questions that basically had no actual correct answer. It was up to the discretion of the registrar to determine whether the Blacks who applied answered correctly. And most of the times the answer would be, no, you blew it. Or it would be something stupid. And this sounds funny, but I've heard it was true. How many jelly beans are in this jar? You know, stupid exercises like that to determine whether you will get to vote. And who was Eric? Who was the sheriff? Was it Bull Connor who would
Connors was
block the
one of
line?
the legendary. No, you can't come in this town and register to vote.
Right. Or the registrar is at lunch. There'd be a line of Black people ready to vote, ready to register to vote. They'd say, no, she's not there. No. And this would go on for days, and they would never get to vote. That's the reason why we have these acts and titles and sections. And younger people don't get this.
Yeah.
Well, it's not being taught in schools. You know, that's one of the major problems. We're not educating our young these days.
Well,
From what I can see, I mean, you know, sure, there are plenty of intelligent kids out there, but they're not getting what made this country the way it is right now. You know, and of course they didn't live through any of this, so they have no way of knowing otherwise. But you know, I'm still, and I hope we get to it, but I'm still reeling from the revelation that you made, Eric, that I hadn't considered, and I never heard of the third gentleman that you mentioned, that Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and this third guy whose name I just heard 15 minutes ago and do not remember, are all South Americans.
South Africans.
Oligarchs. South African, rather. I'm sorry. Forgive me.
White South
Yeah,
African.
seriously, my mind is still reeling from that. Because
well,
that is absolutely dangerous as hell. And I hope we get into that before we end.
well, it's part of the larger picture for me because the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. This is like the third time they've gone at it. And there was an article in the New York Times, and the headline was Chief Justice Roberts played the long game on voting rights. And basically, they were talking about the fact that he gutted the Voting Rights Act earlier in his career. He was always antithetical to it because he thought, in his mind, Chief Justice Roberts first flirted with cutting back the law in 2009, 4 years into his tenure. And in his majority opinion, in this last thing, Northwest Austin Municipal Utility District Number 1 versus Holder, the Chief Justice took an off-ramp by planting a time bomb. We are now a very different nation from the one that first passed the Voting Rights Act, he wrote. Whether conditions continue to justify such legislation is a difficult constitutional question we do not answer today. That was back in 2009. This latest ruling was, and Alito wrote it, we're no longer the country we were when they passed the Voting Rights Act, and so therefore we're going to get rid of this disparate impact thing, etc. now, and so let's just gut it. So basically, he planted the seed for it back in the 2009 ruling, and Alito and the rest of the 6-3 court, his other 5 conservative justices, decided, yeah, we can put the nail in the coffin in this last thing. And I say that because all those anti-voting laws that were passed primarily in the South was so Black people could never, ever elect any official, even though they might have been in a majority in a state or in a city or in any location where they were. They just had no political rights. And so the federal government finally stepped in and passed these laws you mentioned before, Alan, just to make sure folks of color, including Hispanics, could actually get the right to vote where they lived and worked. And because they're now claiming, and I say claiming, in the US Supreme Court that those times are long past, for me, that's a big lie and a canard, because we now have the reason why we're talking about Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and David Sacks is the third guy. These are all white oligarchic men of money who have bought our government. Elon Musk was the guy who headed Doge and wrecked the federal government, totally destroyed the federal government and
in
the
a couple
federal
months.
workforce, and then took the data and put it in his company. They just snatched all that personal data, Social Security, all that stuff, just to take it to their advantage and possibly to affect upcoming elections, because they know more about people now because of the data they gather. This is all part of the South African mafia that's been running this administration. We're talking about the fact that South African refugees, quote, refugees, go to the head of the, oh yeah, you can come in legally list. The same legal immigration that Stephen Miller has put a wrecking ball to, because he's wrecking legal immigration as badly as they are terrorizing people who are coming across the border, not quite legally, but looking for asylum. They're wrecking the entire immigration structure, except white South Africans can go to the head of the list and be listed as, I don't know what the phrase is, but yeah, here's your stamp. You slide right on through. It's because he's got this three-man mafia on the top of his MAGA one percenter fueling his crazy look at immigration.
Let me support something that you said, Eric. John Roberts, the head of the Supreme Court, he was a protege of Rehnquist, who was Rehnquist was appointed by Nixon in the 1970, early 70s, whose task it was to overturn the civil rights legislation. He was then made Chief Justice of the Supreme Court by Ronald Reagan. Roberts was his protege, and the goal was always to overturn the Voting Rights and Civil Rights Acts to compress what they could do.
Yep.
And again, you talked about the South African mafia and what they've done in the United States government. Musk, as head of Doge, they estimate that 85% of the federal employees that were cut by Doge were Black and Latino.
No kidding. Not a surprise. And most of them were women.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is that same white supremacy playbook that Ronald Reagan actually, right, racism thing, when he launched his 1980 campaign, he went to Neshoba County in Mississippi. Is it Neshoba?
I'm not sure. That might be right.
Yeah. Well, heart of Klan country in Mississippi to launch his campaign. And it claimed, but the phrase that he was using back then, the euphemistic was, I'm here to speak about states' rights. But we all knew back then, just like we know today, the states' rights was the code for, we're going to push these black people back to where it was before they passed these civil rights laws. That same Civil Rights Act that they were trying to cut off at the knees back then before he got elected, that Nixon and his people were anti, Ronald Reagan was even more virulently anti. And that's why he launched his campaign right there in the heart of Klan country. So Donald Trump is just basically the final iteration of let's push the clock back. And he's making no bones about it now, because he's giving you executive orders telling you that we will strip all our federal government entities of any mention of minorities, women, people of color, any LGBTQ people. You've got no rights. All this craziness is what he has his now handpicked Supreme Court rubber stamping, and his Department of Justice. DOJ just launched an investigation. I don't want to say just, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but a new investigation on the Southern Poverty Law Center. SPLC
Yeah.
is a phenomenal civil rights, pro-civil rights organization, nonprofit that has been battling white supremacy in this country from its founding. They were the organization that capped the Klan, the preeminent white racist hood-wearing group in this country, off at the knees by beating them in court, getting a money judgment that destroyed them. And that put the SPLC on the top of the list of organizations to go after. Alan, you had some connection?
You know, what they're doing, the Republicans are using this claim against the Southern Poverty Law Center as a way to try to defeat Democratic candidates. The one they're targeting the most is Senator John Ostroff in Georgia, because he was a supporter of Southern Poverty Law Center, and they supported him. What they're accusing the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Bob, you could explain this better, had plants inside racist groups, which were exposing what the racist groups were doing. And what the Justice Department says, well, they were really supporting the racism. But Bob, you would talk about the history of this.
No, and that was one of their tactics. They went after these racist groups, these white supremacist groups, by finding people by paying people to infiltrate them, to find out basically what they were doing and when they would do it, which went a long way to dismantling the Klan and a lot of the supremacist groups at the time. And the Justice Department is, I'm sorry, hilariously accusing SPLC of paying to support these groups, which is the polar opposite of the founding of the reason why they exist. It's a ridiculous argument.
It basically is the big lie.
It's a tremendous lie.
Big lie saying that they are paying to support white supremacy group, the same organization that kneecapped them in court, and definitely, yes, use infiltrators, as you said, to help bring them down. So the big lie, same big lie about, oh, that was a peaceful demonstration on January 6th in 2021 that's now on our government websites as official history of that day, correct? Is that not how they've reworded it?
If you go to the White House website, it's a whole different history of January 6th, which doesn't relate to the truth at all. But go ahead, Eric.
So they're using that same big lie on SPLC. I'll cut you off, Ray. Go ahead.
No, there was always this argument that these people that infiltrated these groups were provocateurs. Have you ever heard that? I mean, I heard a lot of this during COINTELPRO, that that the people who infiltrated were actually instigators.
COINTELPRO,
outside agitators.
Our young viewers, COINTELPRO was the FBI infiltration of all those revolutionary groups, like the Black Panthers and all those similar, the Young Lords, whomever, that they actually put plants in. At one point, they had more informants in those groups than the groups had members.
That's absolutely correct.
He did this in the 1920s to break the labor unions as well. This is an old police tactic.
It is. Exactly right. It's a tactic that the FBI has used over and over again, and it's just absolutely ridiculous that they would accuse the SPLC of paying to support racist groups. Just utterly ridiculous.
The interesting thing about this whole bit, because what happens when you spread those big lies? The other headline that caught my eye is this one: Fidelity and Vanguard won't allow donations to Southern Poverty Law Center. Both entities cited the Justice Department investigation into the civil rights organization in messages to its charitable account holders. And so these are, I forget what the phrase is, donor, whatever, granting rights organizations that allow people to give money to various organizations from one umbrella organization like Vanguard or like Fidelity, and they say, make sure it goes to SPLC, make sure it goes to whomever. They have now struck those two organizations, Vanguard and Fidelity, have struck the SPLC from their list of people that can receive money for their operations from outside people. And that's because they've decided they're going to play along with this canard that the Department of Justice has foisted on the system by claiming that the SPLC is under an investigation for nefarious, whether it's charitable, money laundering, whatever the charges. I mean, what do they say the charges are?
Yeah, wire fraud, money laundering. I mean, there's a lot in there on the SPLC charges. But
Yeah.
Vanguard and the other one, they're two of the
Fidelity.
largest. They have billions in assets.
Yes.
And it's the owners of the assets that get to decide, where the money goes. But they're saying that, okay, you cannot give it to the SPLC. We don't have a conviction. We have a charge by a DOJ, which is basically lying.
And the other folks who are not kowtowing to this DOJ and this MAGA bozo were saying, those are allegations. We have no proof. Nobody's convicted of anything. So as far as we're concerned, SPLC is still a viable nonprofit that can receive funds, etc. The upright people who are not afraid or who are going to the letter of the thing, until you show us a conviction that you've proven these charges, they're still fine as far as we're concerned.
The good news about the SPLC, and I'll let you didn't mean to cut you off, is that they have a great arsenal of attorneys. So there's going to be big time pushback. Yeah,
they've already filed their first answer, and part of it, I read part of it. Basically, they said, guess what? FBI already knew that we had planted these people in these places because we'd always contact them to let them know, and then we would give them the information that they needed to help take down these organizations. Mm-hmm. So for them to come at us with this bogus charge about, well, we paid people to support this, kind of negates all that information we have shoveled to them over the years. So they're not laughing. I'm laughing, but this is going to cost them a ton of money to fight this crazy stuff in a court of law. And so they're winning, even though they're not winning. They're causing people who should be using that money for good to have to do it in defense of a damn lie that this Department of Justice is foisting on the community and the rest of the world. But this is part of this white supremacy playbook. This is part of, no, we are turning the clock back. That's the phrase I'm using. Now, you guys may have some other examples that you might want to throw into this hopper that ties in. We're turning the clock back to the white supremacy canard that's being foisted on the rest of the country.
Well, the other thing about Vanguard and Fidelity is the leadership of these companies who are major billionaires have all directed their companies to invest in Bitcoin. And,
that's
I think is a Ponzi scheme that will eventually blow the whole thing down. But again, Bitcoin is a big part of the Trump portfolio, both his personal portfolio and he's advocated for.
Didn't Sacks and Thiel start in that whole cryptocurrency thing when they made their initial fund, $1 billion whatever, before they went into other Silicon Valley venture capitalists? It was some kind of cryptocurrency stuff. So so they have basically co-opted Trump, MAGA, because Trump's sons are all into cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and all this coin stuff now, because you're right, Alan. As far as I'm concerned, it's a Ponzi scheme, but Ponzi schemes work if people want them to work. And if these billionaires want that to work and can convince the federal government, and they seem to have already co-opted it, then they're going to make it work unless we can vote these SOBs out of office.
I mean, technically, cryptocurrency could work, but based on the folks who run the different coins, you're right. It does amount to a Ponzi scheme. Look at what Sam Bankman-Fried did. I mean, he took all sorts of money from all sorts of people from in a crypto fund that he basically ran like it was a checking account
Mm-hmm.
in his pocket. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there a Trump coin
yes.
Oh yeah.
coming out or has
Oh,
already
oh, yeah.
come out? Yeah.
This is all part of the big grift. This is part of the big grift. This is the con artist at work. His sons have bought the model. That's why they're passing all the. Who was it? The vice president, J.D. Vance, who came out with some big speech on the value of cryptocurrency. I believe that was when he was running for Senate back in Ohio. He was making a big speech on cryptocurrency. Why do you think that is? Peter Thiel, the cryptocurrency guy, who's been funding all his campaigns and greased the wheels for him to become the vice president. We're talking about this South African mafia group co-opting this current government on any number of levels that people are not aware of.
And with that, just want to give you a 1 minute and 30-second warning.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because we have barely begun to scratch the surface of how bad
Absolutely.
off we are. Alan, go ahead.
Rich, powerful people like Thiel-Sacks and Musk and Trump, they need white voters to keep them in office. And the way they have gotten ordinary white people to vote for them, and this goes back to the 60s and Richard Nixon, is they play the race card. And what their position is that equity, that civil rights, that diversity discriminates against white people. And if you're having a hard time, it's because the government is discriminating against you. So you vote for us, it empowers the wealthy, and you get the shaft in the end anyway. This is what's going on in the United States today.
And the timing is perfect because here comes the midterms. And that's about, we have about 30 seconds.
Well, in 30 seconds, I guess all we can do is sign off and say, folks, to be revisited again, because we've just begun to scratch the surface. This has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Alan Singer.
And I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And we'll catch you the next time, folks. Stay safe.